So what it's done is it's made the rating model a little more subjective than it was before, and they've introduced new variables, but it's created quite a domino effect for pricing increase around certain parts of the country.
Let's face it, like flood insurance and insurance in general, they're astronomical highs, right? But maybe you'll tell us the rest of where we're really at with that, and dive in right into what's the problem that's going on right now, DJ, when it comes to this insurance stuff.
Well, FEMA just changed their rating system here within the last few years. And that's been a huge topic of conversation if you followed it at all in the news. In particular, if you've ever bought a property in a flood zone in the last few years, you know what I'm talking about. So FEMA's old rating system was what they considered to be outdated. And so they introduced what's called Risk Rating 2.0, which is designed to be a more accurate way of assessing flood risk for properties around the country. And so what it's done is it's made the rating model a little more subjective than it was before. And they've introduced new variables, but it's created quite a domino effect for pricing increase around certain parts of the country. And the problem with it currently is that there's still an overwhelming lack of transparency that insurance brokers are really battling. And then for the end property owner to understand, why the same property, can have such varying costs from seller to buyer, or, from something they may have bought a flood policy on 2 years ago, to buying a policy on the property next door today, and why the costs can be 10x what they used to be. So it's quite the conversation these days.
Absolutely. It's a nightmare for multifamily owners trying to underwrite their properties or buying assets where the insurance costs are 10xing, right? It's very, very challenging. It hurts the affordable housing, our ability for people to build housing, to buy housing, to renovate housing, because the cost continues to go up. So got it. So that's the problem. I think it also, you might have touched on just the natural disasters that are going on, because I know from California, it's like fire insurance is through the roof. Right? They're just cutting insurance altogether. And then you have like Texas and Florida for like hurricanes or floods, or, just talk about the overall just affect the overall environment, and just these big disasters that are happening that are increasing the cost for insurance.
Yeah. So, I'll speak to kind of insurance in general. I'm not an insurance broker, just being fully transparent there. So, what you're seeing is, essentially carriers within certain parts of the country that are choosing to not involve themselves in those areas. And you're seeing that within the fire markets. We hear about that within wind markets around Florida and other parts of the Gulf Coast. And so you had a trickle-down effect with the amount of access to, the type of premium costs that existed in prior years. And so as you've seen year-over-year increases from the property side, now you're seeing similar effects on the flood insurance side. Now, the main difference between flood insurance and other lines of insurance is that you do have a program through FEMA that is federally regulated. And so anyone within most scenarios can get access to a flood policy. But what you've seen is a lot of private flood companies choosing to get into the flood insurance market. And kind of similarly, they're able to pick and choose which parts of the country they want to offer policies. And then they can also choose when to not renew those policies. So that's kind of in tandem with FEMA changing their rating system. In some instances, if you leave the National Flood Insurance Program, let's say you go to the private market because they've got a really attractive price point, but then 2 years later, they give you a non-renewal. With the way FEMA's program is working now, they've introduced what they call their full risk premium. And it's the ceiling price that FEMA thinks that you should be paying for that particular structure in that part of the country. And so if someone gets a non-renewal from the private market and they have to come back to the NFIP at that ceiling price from day one, it can be quite a dramatic uptick in pricing. So it's really making investors have to think big picture with choices they're making between which carrier they go with for their flood insurance.